Welcome to Wild Spirits Outdoors, the place for real hunting talk, tactics, and a few laughs. Now let's dive in with your host, Brad Dijon.
Hey guys and gals, welcome to Wild Spirits Outdoors. If you're listening on the day of the drop, today is Tuesday, February 10th, 2026. This is going to be a fairly short intro because I'm still trying to recover from a marathon podcast session that took place yesterday. The episode that is being dropped today was actually recorded on Saturday night. So what was that, February 7th? Something like that? I don't remember. Either way, it was a very long day, and then we started recording at 7 p.m. I had a very special guest. It was a privilege and an honor to speak with this gentleman. I didn't know exactly how the podcast was going to go because I've only had a couple messages back and forth with this guy. But I had an opportunity to sit down and have a great conversation via remote recording with Jordan Hoover, who is the chairman for the Upper Peninsula Deer Advisory Team. Jordan and I kind of intended to go for 1.5 to 2 hours of podcasting, but it was such a great conversation, and we ended up going down some back roads, if you will, and just kind of taking the scenic route. And it was a fun conversation. But guys, it was over 5 hours, I believe, and I was like, I don't think I've got the stamina to sit down and listen to a 5-hour podcast. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to record this introduction here, and I'm going to break this podcast into 2 parts. So this will be part 1, which is going to kind of break into the introduction of Jordan, and we're going to start talking about some things, a little bit of Jordan's history, some information about what he has done with the Deer Advisory Team, the inner workings of what they are doing as far as putting out their suggestions to the NRC. We'll talk about the NRC. We'll talk about one buck regulations, and we'll get into some other stuff as well. Then I am going to break off from that, and I will load part 2 for, what would that be? Tuesday, February 17th, I believe. So that will be part 2 of this very same conversation, and we're going to dive into some pretty deep topics and some great conversation. And I had a fantastic time. Jordan was a very respectful gentleman, very knowledgeable gentleman, and I have immense amount of respect for him just after that conversation. I believe this is a salt of the earth gentleman, and I believe he cares deeply about the whitetail deer that we all love to chase. And I have a renewed hope after talking to him for the future of deer hunting here in the state of Michigan. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and sign off, and I will see you guys after the podcast, and I will give a quick summary, and then we'll talk to you again in part 2. So we'll talk to you guys after the episode. I hope you enjoy. All right, Jordan, can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine.
Awesome, man. Well, first and foremost, I truly appreciate you reaching out and expressing interest in having this conversation. This is one that I've wanted to have with somebody who's probably got a higher level of expertise and understanding of the intricacies of what's going on here in Michigan than what I do. I'm just a guy who likes to hunt and has had the blessing to hunt multiple regions within the state. Never been able to hunt the UP, but and I've also got to hunt other states, and I've seen what, in my opinion, I think works and what doesn't work. But I think Michigan is a very unique animal when it comes to not only how the species survives throughout our state, but how the regulations have to run. So I really appreciate you taking the time to get on, have this conversation. Folks that are listening, Jordan Hoover is the chairman of the Upper Peninsula Deer Advisory Team. And from that big of an introduction, Jordan, I'm going to go ahead and let you just kind of jump in on that and elaborate a little bit more about yourself and how you got involved in this.
Sure. Well, first, I want to say thanks for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity, and I'm really looking forward to having some great and gritty discussion this evening. So how did I get involved with the Deer Advisory Team? Well, about 3 years ago, they put together what was called the DMI, or the Deer Management Initiative, which was requested by the Natural Resources Commission to address perceived shortfalls in deer management in the state of Michigan. And I think there was something on the order of 4,000 applicants statewide. And I got lucky enough to be drawn for that. So we went through a whole year of exhaustive introduction to all things deer biology, ecology, forestry, you name it. There was a tremendous amount of time put into us with the educational aspects and just making sure that everybody was up to speed. Because we had 20 people from the lower, 20 people from the upper, all different backgrounds. We had foresters, we had rank and file deer hunters, people from the ag industry. So you had really a diverse background of individuals that was brought together for that. And they wanted to make sure everybody was all on the same page, working off the same data, all that kind of stuff before we got into it. And as most folks are aware, the DMI ended rather badly. After a year of intensive negotiations, I'll call it, the NRC at that time did not accept any of our recommendations, zero. And I think that really disappointed a lot of hunters that were hopeful for change and looking at that as, okay, maybe we're turning over a new leaf here. And I think at the same time, it reinforced a lot of the cynical hunters as well.
Yeah.
See, I told you. So that was the start of it. There was a 1-year sunset. So the DMI effectively only ran just the initial year and then it was done.
Sure.
And, myself and others, we went to the department and we said, hey, listen, that there was so much time and effort put into this to build this team and all the resources and the time and the money and the effort expended. Why throw it away?
Right.
And, I pointed to the fact that historically, this actually wasn't a new idea. Back in the late 90s, we had RDAT, which was Regional Deer Advisory Team. I think around 2010-ish, somewhere in there, there was another version of this that took place. So it pops up, it dissolves, it pops up, it dissolves. And I just, I talked directly with Chad Stewart about it, and I said, Chad, this is the flagship species of the state of Michigan, the whitetail deer. There's been advisory teams before. It's reasonable to believe there will be a need for an advisory team into the future. And we would just like for the department to consider continuing this. And fortunately for all of us, they decided to do that. So when the NRC let go of it, the department picked it up and they rebranded it. They call it the DAT, or Deer Advisory Team. But it was a lot of carryover of the initial members. We lost a few people in the transition, but not many. And we've been hard at it for 2 years now with the Deer Advisory Team.
Excellent. No, that's awesome. Awesome to hear. And I'll be the guy to admit it. Like, I'm the cynical guy to a huge extent. And it's only because, like you said, these things come and they go. And it feels like as a hunter, it's like being a Detroit Lions fan. I mean, you're like, this is our year. We're actually going to get what we've been hoping to get, and then you get kicked in the nuts, and it feels like you're getting kicked in the nuts. And I know there's things that are taking place that we don't hear about every single day, but as a hunter and talking to a lot of hunters in the state of Michigan and just hearing their frustration, I think that's a lot of it. Is people are just like, yeah, we've heard this is going to happen before, and where did it get us? So to hear that you've been able to continue to grind away at this, and it sounds to me, based on not only what I've heard from the brief conversations you and I have had back and forth, but a lot of the stuff that I'm seeing on social media, we might actually be seeing some movement and what I would like to call a significant crossroads coming up in the future of the deer hunting here in the state of Michigan. Would you agree with that?
Very much so. I would say that we stand at arguably the most critical point we've ever faced in the history of deer management in the state of Michigan. We are either going to take bold steps toward positive change that is going to transform Michigan deer hunting forever, or we're going to double down on failed policy and things are going to spiral down and quickly.
Yeah.
I don't think there's going to be any in between.
I I don't want this to sound like an echo chamber, but I tend to agree with you. I know a lot of guys who don't even bother hunting in this state anymore. They're like, why bother? Why own land? Why lease land when for that same amount of money I can go to an Illinois or an Ohio, or Indiana has come so far in the past 5 to 10 years. So yeah, I personally think we're at a very pivotal moment, and there's a whole generation of hunters coming up that are, they're going to be at the forefront of that. Or are they going to, are you going to stay or are you going to go kind of thing? So, before we,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, before we dive into the nuts and bolts, just out of curiosity for myself and for my listeners, what's a little bit of your personal background? Like, where do you reside? Where did you grow up? What kind of influences in hunting did you have? And, besides whitetail deer, are there any other species out there that you love to chase? And what is it about the whitetails that tripped your trigger like so many of us?
Well, thanks for teeing that up for me. That was exactly where I was going to go. So my background, I'm a born and raised Michigan boy. I'm gonna get in trouble for saying this on the record, but I'm not actually a true blood Uper.
Okay.
I was born in Lower Michigan, St. Joe's Hospital in Ann Arbor. We lived in the Livingston County area, if you're familiar with Pinckney.
Yep.
Yep. That was home when I was very young. And the old man worked in Livonia for Roush Industries. And my mom was a school teacher over in the Belleville area. So I grew up with a fishing pole and a bow in one hand or the other from the time I was old enough to do so. Every time my dad had opportunity to get me out on the woods and waters, that's what we did. It wasn't a matter of recreation for our family. It was part of the fabric of our way of life. It was more than that.
Sure.
It wasn't just something we did. It was part of who we were as a family. And very thankful to have been brought up in that, raised in that, immersed in that from the time I was young. For a long time, I didn't even realize really the gift that I had been given with that upbringing, because I'm like, well, isn't this how everybody grows up? No, it isn't. So I'm really thankful for that. But yeah, I cut my teeth bass fishing and squirrel hunting and doing all those things with my dad. I guess I kind of worked my way up to deer, which is kind of backwards from today, right? Because when you're 5, you get a 270 and you go shoot a 10-pointer.
Yeah.
That's not how I started. I started with the little things, bluegills on the bobber with my dad, or going out with the 22s and squirrel hunting, state land, things like that. When we went home to my grandfather's, I had grandparents in the Thumb area over in North Branch. And my grandfather had a really substantial farm at one time. And tradition at Thanksgiving time was the family, all the uncles and their guys got the shotguns out, and we went rabbit hunting because Grandpa had brush piles all over the farm. Well, guess who was the beagle?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I got to jump up and down on the brush piles and scare the rabbits out. And Grandpa was something else with the 22. The uncles and my dad had the shotguns, and Grandpa let everybody shoot, and then somehow he could come up with the rabbit with that 22 rifle in the end. I don't know how he did it to this day.
The old single shot pinwheel, man.
Oh yeah. But as I very quickly fell in love with archery as soon as my dad introduced it to me. He was a member out at the Washtenaw County Sportsman's Club at the time, and we were frequent flyers at I don't even think it's around anymore, but it was JR Custom Archery.
Okay.
Owned by Jack Romeo. God bless him. He's passed on. And just growing up in that environment in the Sportsman's Club and the archery shop and the woods and waters really shaped who I would become in later years. It grounded me in a way that I wouldn't understand until I was much older.
No, that's great to hear, and it's almost an echo of my childhood. Very, very similar upbringing. It wasn't hunting wasn't a hobby in my family, even though my dad wasn't a bow hunter. I mean, it was just part of our DNA. And much like you, I did not I did not get handed a 243 or a 270 at 5 years old and said, all right, let's go chase deer in September. I was out there, at 5 and 6 chasing bluegill. I had a BB gun. Then it was, okay, you haven't shot yourself with a BB gun, so here's a 22 single shot, and just going up from there. And I mean, it's just been a full-on immersive part of my life. Like it's a part of my fabric of my being. So I can completely feel where you're coming from with that. So
We we ended up moving up to the UP when I was early middle school. So we made the jump from Livingston County to Houghton County. We moved up to Calumet, if you're familiar with that at all. North of Houghton, about 10-15 minutes.
Yep.
And yeah, we always had a lot of tie to the UP, because from the time I was a very, very, very young boy, my dad and the uncles and all their buddies and whatnot would show up with truckloads of gear and make the pilgrimage north to the great wilderness of the UP to deer camp. And I got to watch that, growing up, and that build that anticipation for one day I'd be old enough to go with the men. Oh, I was so excited, When they left, I was always, helping load stuff in the trucks, and I was glued to the window like those Garfield cats. You remember those old suction cup Garfield cats? Oh yeah, that was me on the window the day they were all supposed to come home. Are they here yet? Are they here yet? Mom, are they coming home? Because I couldn't wait for them to pull in the drive. I was looking to see if there's deer strapped on top of the trucks, and I want to hear all about it. Tell me everything. I want to hear the stories. So I grew up with that. And then once I turned 12, I got to come to bow camp with the men. So there was a long family history of taking in all that God's country had to offer. And it was just a natural fit. That's who we were. Moving up here was just settling into what home was always meant to be.
Sure.
And it was tremendous. As a teenager, I continued to develop, obviously, and on through adulthood. And UP is an entirely different animal, as you're well aware. But I'm thankful that I've experienced what the backcountry of the UP has to offer, and I think it's changed me and shaped me as a hunter in ways that I probably wouldn't have been able to experience in the lower.
No, that's cool.
Today, I've got 4 sons. And my oldest is 16 and my youngest is 10. Been married 17 years, and I'm raising my family in the same manner in which I was raised. Fishing poles and bows for everybody.
Amen.
Hunts, all my children hunt. So, passing on the heritage, I guess.
No, that's awesome to hear. So with the evolution of you starting where you started, ending up in the UP, has anything in your views of hunting management, hunting culture here in the Michigan changed from, say, when you were down here in Livingston County to what it is today where you're at?
Well, I will say this, it's a bit of an unfair comparison for the reason that I predominantly hunt the UP and have nearly all of my life. I had some limited experience when I was a young man, going out with my dad, Livingston County, and we had friends over in White Cloud. We'd go over there once in a while.
That's my back door. That's where my property's at, actually, is in White Cloud.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yeah.
Small world.
Yeah.
But I once we moved to the UP, I never returned here to hunt for many, 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 many years. And I'm fortunate to have some very good friends. I jokingly call them dear friends, DER friends. They're they're family to me. But we get together in the spring every year and help out some farmers down in the Thumb area doing crop damage shooting. So I'm down in the LP in the Thumb area every spring doing that. And that's boy, it's certainly eye-opening to see deer densities that are 120 deer per square mile, and then come back and hunt the backcountry of the UP and sit all day and see 6 deer.
Sure. Yep.
Different worlds.
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to that White Cloud thing, so I live in Newaygo, if you're familiar with the town of Newaygo. I live The Muskegon River is 400 yards behind my house here, and then just 12 yards straight north of me is where my 60 acres of property is, just east of White Clouds. So um, even what's so crazy about it to me when you're talking about deer numbers and things, um, obviously, like I said, I've never hunted the UP, but I've spent a lot of hours just hiking, backpacking, camping through the backcountry of the UP, just exploring, taking my family up there every chance we could get to go. So seeing that, seeing the type of habitat, seeing the deer numbers, and then come to where I'm at, and let's say the deer numbers are 1.75 times what you're seeing up there. I don't have high deer numbers where my property is. It's very low deer numbers. On my 60 acres, I'm lucky to see, one family group of does, and, just the movement of the bucks as they're cruising through there. Might be 3 or 4 different bucks I see throughout a season. I'm not going to see, and I've got, acres of food plots on my 60 acres, but I'm lucky to see, in any given sit, more than 3 or 4 deer. Now you take that and you go just 12 miles south of my house, so less than 25 miles from my property, and you're looking at deer numbers much more like what you said you're used to seeing in the southern part, where I can drive past ag fields and see 25, 30, 40, 50 deer in just about every single field. So to me, that really exemplifies how unique the state of Michigan is when it comes to the deer numbers in general. So and I think that's part of what makes it such an impassioned conversation with folks, is there's people living in different areas that have a very strong view based on what they see, much like me. And then there's people who have seen bigger expanses of everything the state has to offer and can see that, guys, this isn't a one-pronged attack. There's got to be a method to this, and it can't be quite as broad sweeping as what we've been trying. So I'm excited to kind of dig into that.
No question, we have tremendous diversity in the state of Michigan, even within our respective peninsulas. I mean, I'll drill down on that a little bit. Even within one DMU here in the Upper Peninsula, I mean, I can drive 15 minutes to my west, and I can see 45, 50 deer in the fields. I can drive 15, 20 minutes to my east, and I might see nothing.
Sure.
So even within one DMU, it can change so much. And, that's what makes deer management in Michigan so difficult, and why, at least part of why, I believe that hunter satisfaction is always rather poor, because there's always a cross section of people that feel that the management policies that are put in place aren't appropriate for their area. And, they're probably right.
Sure. Yeah, and that's why it's such a challenge. And I think, looking at it from the outside in, what my gut tells me is a lot of the reasons why these different advisory committees that have been put together have kind of fizzled out is just because of the fact that, not even so much that there can't be an agreement brought up amongst different regions, but it's hard. And when it's hard, and you have limited resources and funding, I think that oftentimes becomes the reason why they just say, you know what, we don't have the time or resources to keep fighting this fight. And I think that's, from the outside looking in, part of why it fizzles out.
There is one and only one indisputable fact about Michigan deer hunters. If you put 10 of them in a room, you're going to get 12 opinions.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's a fair assessment. Yeah.
Everybody's got a lot of passion about deer, especially bucks, which we'll get to later. But, one of the things that I find is nobody knows your ground like you. Nobody. And the areas that we hunt in, we're intimately familiar with them. And I might be tipping my hand a little bit here, being a little prejudicial, but I think that bow hunters in particular tend to be a little more plugged into the deeper pulse of what's going on.
Yeah.
It's not to say there's not gun hunters who aren't bow hunters or some crossover there, but I think there's something a little different with the bow hunter mentality and their approach to the pursuit of the deer, and all the things that demands of an archer to be successful. It requires a little bit more of a knowledge base.
Sure.
With a rifle, you can go out there, and if you're a decent marksman, you can see it, you can kill it.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of strategy involved in that, and it doesn't require that intimate knowledge. But a lot of folks, I think, tend to get caught up in the view from their own shooting lane. It's really hard for Michigan hunters to put themselves in other people's shoes, and I think that's where a lot of the discussions end up going sideways, because guys are just devout and passionate about what it is they're seeing, what they believe is appropriate, and then the neighbor 5 miles down the road says, well, no, that's BS.
Yeah.
Well, is one guy lying and one guy telling the truth? Well, I don't think so. They're both telling you the truth.
Yep.
And the reality is different in both places. And I think that sets a lot of conversations up for failure, because Michigan hunters aren't very good at seeing it from another person's view.
Sure. And I think that's a fair assessment. And I guarantee I'm guilty of that at plenty of times when I get into conversations with folks. I try to look at it through different lenses. I try to hunt different. I've got my own private property, but I honestly spend more time on Michigan public grounds in different areas, chasing new experiences and trying to see, just what does it look like here compared to what I'm used to seeing on my own private property. And I chase them in Ohio, Indiana, Wisconsin, Illinois. So I try to look at it from a broader picture, but no matter what, your own personal biases. And then, like you said, it's not necessarily it's a bias. It's the factual evidence that each individual person sees, and it can change not just from DMU to DMU, but within the DMU and from neighbor to neighbor, it can change, So yeah, I think you're spot on when it comes to put 10 in a room and you're going to get 12 different opinions. And it's not that anybody's lying. It's just, it's their own unique perception. And it's hard as somebody you always find the biggest arguments come from the guys that truly love and are truly passionate about the animals that we're hunting. And it's, you've got your trolls and everything, but really the most heated conversations are going to be between two guys that truly love the animal, truly love the sport. And they're just dug in on what they think is what's needed. And it's not that they're wrong. It's just the nature of the beast, I guess. So when we look at what led you to where you're at now, where was the point where you were like, I need to get involved? I feel like I have something that I can offer to this space more than just being a sounding board on social media or bitching at deer camp.
Well, I grew up with this. I remarked about how I was raised as a young man, and part of that upbringing was observing my father take an active role in deer advocacy in the state of Michigan. Long time ago, when MUCC was still worth a damn. And yeah, I said that. My dad was involved at a policy level with Michigan United Conservation Clubs, and his wheelhouse, as you can imagine, was white-tailed deer. And it made a big impression on me as a teenager, passing by the door to my dad's study late at night, and he was always in there, always reading over, pie charts, bar graphs, data, research, whatever, talking to hunters around the state, always making phone calls. He was immersed in study, and the dedication and devotion that he poured into that was inspiring. Even as a teenager, I looked at that and I thought, wow, he is really busting his chops on this stuff. And he would drive, from our home in Calumet back and forth to Lansing for various meetings, things like that, to commission meetings, MECC, policy meetings, all that kind of stuff. And he did it all on his own dime. There was no money in it. Nobody was writing checks for reimbursement or giving him gas cards or anything like that. He was paying in to a resource he loved and fighting to give me a future. That made a big impression.
No, I can respect that for sure.
Once I became a father, I guess the apple didn't fall far from the tree. You know, you look at your children, and I think that every father wants to leave it better for their sons. You want to leave a legacy. And I was one of those guys for a while that I'm like, yeah, nothing's ever going to change in the state. The bureaucracies are crap. The DNR is crap. The NRC is crap. Hunters can't agree on nothing. I don't care. I'm just going to my tree stand. I'm going to do me.
Yep.
But doing me was part of the problem. I was part of the problem because I wasn't being a part of the solution.
Yep.
By default, that makes me part of the problem.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know what? I'm going to get involved. And back in about 2014, I started going for meetings. The DNR would have meetings. I'd go to them up here, just listen to all the different commentary, whether it was wolves or chronic wasting disease, whatever it was, start soaking up the knowledge, meeting people. I've been doing this work for over 10 years now, largely as an independent, unaffiliated, private person. I did do a brief stint with Hunter Nation and a brief stint with UP Whitetails Association. And I'm just going to be honest with you. I was pretty disgusted with both organizations for different reasons. And I think there's a lot of organizations out there that soak up membership dollars and really don't do shit for Michigan hunting or the Michigan hunter, but they're happy to take your money.
Sure.
And I didn't want to be a part of that. I didn't like some of the stances that some of the organizations took on things. I didn't think that they were scientifically based. And I'm not a guy that's going to wear a ball cap with a logo on it, sit behind a microphone and puke up talking points that I don't believe are right. So that left me one option, the hard road, being an independent. And, you know, when you show up to a commission meeting and Jordan Hoover, who puts his camo on the same way Brad does, sits down and gives my 2 cents on UP deer management, nobody cares because the guy that sat down and spoke before me had a nice embroidered shirt and a hat with a logo, and he said something like this: well, on behalf of 40,000 members across the state of Michigan. So who's Jordan Hoover?
Yeah.
Nobody. It was tough. It was a tough uphill climb, but the more I got involved, the deeper I got, the more I knew I needed to dig in and get involved even more. It was obvious there were problems. It was obvious that all the guys that supposedly had solutions didn't actually. And real change needed to take place, and we needed to kind of upset the apple cart to do it. And I'm not afraid to piss people off.
No, that's I love hearing it, man. I really do. And you know, I don't know if we'll agree on everything. That's for us to find out as we go through this conversation. But I don't think to have a meaningful, respectful conversation, you have to agree on everything, right? That's one of my biggest pet peeves when I listen to a lot of, I'm not going to say any names, when I listen to podcasts that have people on and all it is an echo chamber. There's got to be some substantive conversation. If all I'm going to do is agree with you, then my listeners that don't agree are going to sit there and go, well, why didn't you ask this? Or, oh, he should have asked that at that point in time. So like I said, as we dive into this, I'm just going to look at it from, I'm just your average guy who loves to hunt. And I'm just going to look at it from my experiences and kind of, you know, if there's questions I have for you. But one of the issues I think I'm going to find is a lot of the stuff you say, I'm going to be just sitting here nodding in agreement because I do think we're going to agree on a lot of stuff. But I'll be perfectly honest with you. I've been that guy for, let's say, for the past 20 years. I've been that guy who's just like, I'm just going to do my own thing because this state's a cluster and nothing's going to change. So when I get some money, I'm going to buy my own property. I'm going to do everything I can do to hold as many deer on my little chunk of property as I can. I'm going to be selective in what I can harvest. And if my neighbor shoots a 2-year-old, so be it. But I'm going to do everything I can in my own little bubble to try to insulate myself from all the BS that's going outside of my property. And I bought my property in 2017, and I think I found out by 2020 that I can't stay insulated because when you own 60 and you're surrounded by 10 parcels that are 20 acres or less, and then you've got a couple 80-acre parcels, you cannot insulate enough with 60 acres. So, and it's a challenge. So
Well, I found our first difference, Brad.
Yeah.
See, I am a diehard public land boot stomper. I don't hunt private
Okay.
at all. Public land's my game.
Yep. No, and I love public land. I mean, if you've listened to any of my episodes, I talk ad nauseum about public land hunting. And like I said earlier, I spend probably more of my time on Michigan public ground than I do my own private. But I love having my own property. If I never shoot a deer on my 60 acres, like it doesn't even matter to me. It'll matter to my wife because she'll be like, how much money did you spend this year on food plots? And how many times did you run a backhoe? And how many times did you run a front end loader to go move stuff around? But
return on investment, right?
That's right. So, let's dive in a little bit on the Upper Peninsula Deer Advisory Team. And as the chairman, what responsibilities does that kind of entail, and what does it really mean to serve as the chairman of the Deer Advisory Committee or Deer Advisory Team? Not only what does it mean to the advisory team itself, but on a personal level, what does it mean to you to have the honor to represent a lot of folks as the chairman of the advisory team?
Well, firstly, I would say that it's a swanky title that sounds far more important than it is.
Okay.
Being the chairman means that I'm a professional pinata. I get flack from everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes with the job. Fortunately, God blessed me with broad shoulders and tree trunks for legs, so I can carry that weight. But what's my job as the chair? Well, I'm a facilitator. So when we have our advisory team meetings, it's partly my job to make sure everybody's getting heard. Nobody gets too belligerent, over passionate, rude, things like that. I'm kind of the moderator, if you will. I work in conjunction with DNR personnel to help formulate agendas that our team is going to discuss, troubleshoot. It's also within my purview as the chairman to disseminate information to the public, whether that be a newspaper, podcast like this one, sitting down with Jim Dretzinger, whatever it is. It's part of my duty to communicate and engage with the public. That's kind of the rough job description. What does it mean to me? It means the world. It means the world. And you used the correct word. It is an honor. I wasn't appointed. I was voted in by my peers. And there were a couple other gentlemen on the Upper Peninsula team that ran against me, and they'd been on every board and every committee since before God created dirt, and made sure to read off their resume. Well, then here I come, with my putting my camo on the same way Brad does, and I'm like, well, I haven't served on 13 boards and 7 committees. In fact, I've never done this before at all. And I don't represent 40,000 hunters, and I'm not the president of a sportsman's club, but you won't find anybody more passionate and hardworking, period. And one thing that I threw out there, I said, to me, it's imperative that whoever the chairperson is for this team is objective and unbiased. I don't know if it would be reasonable to appoint someone who is here under the auspices of representing a group and that group's views to that position, knowing they will not be objective. And I think that kind of set everybody back in their chair, like, whoa, good point. Because I was appointed to the advisory team as an independent, unaffiliated member. There's other individuals that represent groups and clubs and all that. That wasn't me. And I felt that was important, that the chairman, who to some extent is going to do a little bit of steering, has to be objective, has to be unbiased, has to be fair about what he's doing. And, the team, I guess, liked my pitch and voted me in. And I'm very thankful for the opportunity to serve in that capacity. And it's been both trying and wonderful at the same time.
Sure. Can I ask a question? And you don't need to say names, but the gentlemen that were going up against you, are they still part of the Deer Advisory Team?
One.
Well, that's good to hear. I was honestly expecting to say neither one of them were, and that would have pretty much told me what I needed to know. But it tells me what I need to know about one of them anyway. So I won't dive into that any further. But it's oftentimes you find just how vested somebody's interest and passion is in something when they don't get what they want. Are they still going to stick around for the journey ahead? So that's why I asked that question. But let's dive in a little bit on the. Let's take a 30,000-foot view of the state of Michigan and the deer regulations. And I want to structure this because this podcast does reach folks beyond the state of Michigan. So for folks in Michigan who may not be fully aware, and for folks that live outside of the state of Michigan, kind of how are the deer regulations structured in the state of Michigan right now as it relates to the different zones? We don't got to get into the nitty gritty of every single regulation, but big picture, how are deer regulations kind of structured in the state of Michigan right now?
Oh boy. So my opinion is that we kind of have a patchwork quilt that's a mess. Up in the Upper Peninsula, we have a hunter's choice system. So you can purchase a combo tag, and if you do, then you're subject to APRs, which is 3 points and 4 points on the side, respectively. You also have the option to purchase a single tag, which is completely unrestricted. So you can take a legal buck 3 inches or longer. And you got the Northwest 13, which of course, that's full-blown APRs down there. Then you got other sections of the state where disease management zones over in your TD area in the Northeast Lower Peninsula. That has more liberal regs because of the disease. And things have changed on again, off again, in response to hotspots with chronic wasting disease and how that's being managed or not managed, as the case may be in some situations. You got agricultural influence. So you've got, up in Traverse City, for example, they might issue damage permits for bucks because they're rubbing up the cherry trees. Then you move south and you start getting into bigger ag country. You've got farmers with crop damage issues, deer density issues all over the place. So there's longer seasons, there's special seasons, there's early archery, there's extended late antlerless. Like I said, it is just a patchwork quilt of regulations. I dare say it lacks any uniformity at all.
Okay. I've said this on several different podcasts and on, some of my social media posts that the Upper Peninsula is a completely different animal than the Lower Peninsula, and there's areas of the Upper Peninsula that are completely different animals than the area right next to them. And the same is true for the Lower Peninsula. But as a Upper Peninsula resident who has spent a lot of time up there, aside from just, let's say, deer numbers, what's the biggest difference you see that adds a layer of complexity to the UP versus, say, the southern half of the Lower Peninsula?
So up here in the Upper Peninsula, survivability is number one. We've got a high density of apex predators, and we have winter habitat, which is absolutely devastated. And the combination of the two, mixed in with some bad policy with deer management, has pushed us nearly to the brink. And when you're talking about a northern region like the UP, high snowfall, brutal cold, months and months and months of winter habitat is imperative. Winter habitat is king above all. Regulatory changes are going to have some effect, but ultimately we have to address the habitat shortfalls for our deer herd to have any kind of a meaningful future. And conversely, down in the southern Lower Peninsula, you also have a habitat issue there as well, because the only thing propping up your deer herd down there is ag.
Sure.
You have a drought one year, and 3/4 of the deer in those areas are going to die. They're going to starve. Way above carrying capacity. So it's interesting because up here we have areas that were actually above carrying capacity in the UP, which sounds wild to hear someone say, right? Because I talked about sitting all day seeing 5 or 6 deer, but we've got winter habitat that's so damaged and so degraded, we just can't hold numbers of deer anymore.
Sure.
Now, I did a demonstration one time to illustrate at a sportsman's club what carrying capacity is. And I took a mason jar and I filled it up with water, put a few drops of food coloring in it, set it on the table. Said, okay, this is carrying capacity, and this represents being at carrying capacity. And then I took another mason jar with water and another mason jar with water, and I kind of brought them up to the sides. And I had tape around them. And on one, I wrote supplemental feeding, and on the other, I wrote warehousing does. In other words, not shooting any does. They said, let's see what these do when I dump them into this jar. So, of course, I dumped the supplemental feeding in there and it just runs all over the place. Well, there's still the same amount of liquid in the jar. We didn't do anything with supplemental feeding. Well, let's try not shooting any does. So I dumped the whole second jar in there and it runs all over the floor. Well, still the same amount of water. And that really hit home with a lot of people because they didn't realize you're not gaining any ground with bad policy. Like, the habitat is only going to hold so many animals no matter what you do.
Sure.
And that's it. The rest of them are going to die, whether it's starvation, whether it's depredation, whatever it is. So it's really kind of fickle in a way to have places in the northern regions of the UP that are above carrying capacity, and simultaneously in the southern lower, you've got the same thing, but for differing reasons. In the end, it all falls back to habitat.
That's interesting. What's the driving factor behind the habitat issue up there?
Well, hemlock and cedar are the primary thermal covers that are most valuable for our deer winter complexes, commonly called deer yards. So our deer are migratory. Once the big snow comes, they're going to get down out of the high country and they're going to head for the deer yards. And the state of Michigan only owns roughly 10% of the landmass of those deer winter complexes. 90% is privately held, and about 85% of it is held by industrial landowners, timber companies. So it's kind of it's a catch-22. You know, you've got timber companies that are in business to make money, and they make money cutting trees.
Sure.
And there's money in cedar. What do you do? You know, as a guy who's a devoutly conservative man and believes in private property rights and limited government and all those kind of things, the last thing I want to do is tell a private landowner, industrial or otherwise, what he can and can't do on his land. He owns it. But when what you're doing on your land impacts the future of an entire resource across the peninsula and hundreds of thousands of people, I think we got to have a conversation.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That's one of my kicking points or sticking points. I'm a devoutly conservative individual myself, and I don't care who that offends. It's just the way I am. But there's people on my side of a lot of views that will agree with me on my views about things until I start talking about, like what you just said, that need for that conversation. And to me, it comes down to, we are endowed with a lot of rights, a lot of freedoms that were given to us by God Almighty, but he didn't give them to us and say, do with these as you will. He gave them to us and said, you have responsibilities that come with these. Whether you're an industrial business or not, you still have to abide by that responsibility. Here in Newaygo, where I live, there's one of the main roads that comes through this town, or goes into this town, is M82. And on M82, just east of the town of the Newaygo, there's a scenic overlook called the High Rollaway. And what that is Newaygo kind of got its start from the logging industry. And the High Rollaway was where they would bring all these logs to and roll them down this massive hill into the Muskegon River, float them out to Lake Michigan, and then they would go to Chicago. We've seen how well it worked for Chicago when they built the entire city out of wood and it all burned up. But I mean, that's that's where all the wood here in this area kind of went towards, was towards the industrialization of a lot of areas, including Chicago. One thing that benefited the area that I live in, and it's not perfect, but the reforestation of these areas. Now, granted, they basically just planted rows and rows of red pine, but it's something, and it does provide thermal cover. There is forage. It creates something besides just a wasteland. Are you getting any of that up there?
So,
Or is the logging outpacing the reforestation efforts?
we have kind of two problems going on. It depends what timber company you're dealing with. We've got one that'll come into an area and just lay waste to it, just clear cut everything standing right down to the root. And it's just an endless post-apocalyptic minefield of tops. And they'll just leave it. Does that eventually generate some deer browse? Well, yeah, it does. The unfortunate thing is, and I got to listen to a really interesting presentation from a gentleman by the name of Dr. Gary Roloff. Those particular practices are allowing a lot of your scrub trees, like your poplar, to outcompete our oaks. We're not getting oak regeneration like we used to. We're losing oaks. And it's kind of gotten to the point where if you know of an oak flat here in the Western UP, you keep your mouth shut. So, logging, does it have its benefits? Yeah. Short-term, long-term. I myself like to see the selective cutting and a little more of a long view on forest management. The other thing that we have going on is they'll come in and they'll clear cut an area, and then they'll just plant a crap ton of red pines. Just row after row after row of red pines, which does nothing but stock the shelves at Lowe's and Home Depot and all that. As far as I'm concerned, red pine is absolutely useless for wildlife, unless you're a red squirrel. Red squirrels seem to like it.
They like it.
But the soil gets so acidic, nothing else would grow there. Again, it turns into a wasteland. So it's really tough. It's really tough. And a thing that I should mention here is people don't understand. I say things are bad. There's not really a comprehension of how bad. So within the last 100 years, we went from 124 uniquely identified deer winter complexes to right now today, 36.
All right, I got to interrupt you and make sure I understood that correctly, because so basically you just said you went from 124 uniquely identified wintering deer yards to, what did you say, 30?
36.
Holy smokes.
Of the 30s, hold on to your hat, it gets worse. Of the 36 that are left today, only 6 of them are meeting DNR metrics for providing sufficient food and shelter. So 30 out of the 36 that remain are failing.
Wow. That's sad to hear. I mean, that's news to me. Like I knew things were bad, but I've never heard the numbers like that. That's it's no wonder between that and the apex predator issues up there that things are kind of heading south, and it's not like a gradual slope. It's getting pushed off the cliff.
Well, and the apex predators dominate the conversation. I'll be really honest with you. That's kind of low-hanging fruit and an easy cop-out. I'm not saying that we don't have a problem, because in my opinion, we do. I mean, we're sitting on record bear numbers and climbing. We don't have the capacity to manage wolves. We've got quite a robust coyote population. We got bobcat, we got lynx, we got cougar. From the second a fawn hits the ground here, something's trying to kill it every day of its life.
Sure.
But that said, as I started this out with, the habitat is king. And this far north, if you can't survive the winter, nothing else matters. I put a picture on my phone. I pulled it up. I'm going to try to hold this up to the camera and see if this will show for you. This is a map of all the remaining deer yards in the entire Upper Peninsula. Can you see that?
It's pretty blurry. Can you back it up just a little bit? Yeah, it's not wanting to focus, but if you screenshot that and email it to me, I will drop it right in this. I'll drop it right in the episode right here.
Yeah, I'll get that to you.
Cool.
But suffice it to say, it all comes down to this. You got to fit 100% of the deer herd into 10% of the habitat for 5 months.
Yeah.
That's about a month.
Now I couldn't see the map, but how spread out are those remaining yards?
Fairly.
So not only do you have to fit 100% of the deer in those yards, but those deer have to migrate that much further just to get to one of these remaining yards.
Right. And having so few deer yards also significantly amplifies the predation success rates, because there was a time when deer yards stretched north to south, east to west across the whole UP. The deer population was distributed out. And I guess modern day, the best analogy is it's shooting fish in a bowl. The wolf walks into a deer yard and there's 400 deer standing there. I mean, take your pick.
Sure.
Do you want ribeyes or do you want strip steaks?
Yeah.
So that doesn't help us either, because the wolves definitely zero in on the deer yards, no doubt about it.
So from a non-hunting line of thought on this, I mean, it ties directly back into hunting, but out of curiosity, and before I ask my question, I'll back up. And if I go back 35 years ago to 7-8-year-old me, taking my trips up to the UP a couple times this summer, a couple times in the fall, and seeing you drive these expanses of nothing, and then you pull into these towns, and there's this booming little town in the middle of nowhere, and then you move on from that one through an expanse of nothing, and then you hit another little town, and it's a booming little town. To fast forward to when my oldest daughter was 12 years old, and I took her up there, and I felt like I was driving through ghost towns that I remembered as a kid being thriving. How much of that is also tied into just the lack of hunting opportunity up there? Has there been a correlation to that? Do you see that, or is that just not? I mean, I'm not saying hunting is the only aspect to it, but is hunting a driving factor behind that?
I do not have any peer-reviewed, sound scientific evidence. However, I do have an opinion. Yes, absolutely. When you look back in time, if you ever see some of these old grainy black and white photos, before the Big Mac was built, there was trucks and cars backed up for miles, bumper to bumper, in northern lower Michigan, waiting to take the ferry across and venture into God's country to hunt the elusive 30-point buck. The legend and lore of UP hunting at one time lived large in the mind of every hunter in the state of Michigan. We were the destination.
Yeah.
You hear all the terminology, the 30-point buck, old mossy horns, the swamp ghost, whatever it is. They go by many names, but the legends drew people from everywhere, from Wisconsin, from lower Michigan. Now, dare I say, people from Ohio used to drive here to hunt. And there's no question that those mom and pops bars and grocery stores and little tackle shops and gas stations, all those things, they made a year's wages in 2 weeks of rifle season. They couldn't keep stuff on the shelves. They couldn't keep beer in the fridge. They couldn't keep powdered milk, whatever it was, mantles for the Coleman lantern, Duracell batteries. It was booming.
Mm-hmm.
You go into one of those small towns, and there was a mom and pop's tavern, and there was nowhere to sit. It was standing room only. That's the butts in the bar. There was nowhere to even stand. People waiting outside to get in and get a table. Not anymore.
Yeah.
It's all gone. And just like you talked about, drive across the Upper Peninsula and you look at some of these places, and I'm sure you're like me, you can remember visiting some of those places, or buying a beef jerky stick at that gas station that now is closed down. The windows are all busted out. The roof is falling in.
Yeah.
Right. It's a tragic story.
It is. And I remember exactly to your point. I remember the first time I took all 3 of our girls to the UP. I think my oldest was 11 or 12, and we all took a weeks-long trip up there, and it was all rustic camping with, put the tent on the back and hike in. And I can't remember what towns it was, but I remember specifically like, hey, when we get up to this next town, we're going to stop at this little gas station. They've got the best, whatever it was, jerky or whitefish dip or something like that.
Right.
And I remember taking them up there, and it was closed. And I'm like, oh man, that's sad to see. And then it just got worse and worse after that. And I haven't been back up there. I didn't go at all this year, so it's been a couple of years since I've been up there. But it really is. To me, it's sad to see something like that in such a beautiful, otherworldly. I mean, I don't know how to describe it to folks that have never been to the UP. Alls I can describe it is when I get across that bridge, I feel my blood pressure drop. I feel a sense of calm come over me. People will think that's corny, but I feel at home, even though I don't live up there. I'm like, this is what it was intended to be. Like, this is how it should be everywhere, is how I feel when I go up there. So it's sad to see that.
Now, I would take it even a step further, because a lot of people don't realize how much investment the Lower Peninsula had in the UP. A lot of camp owners aren't Upers.
Yeah.
They were guys and families from the Lower Peninsula that bought land, that bought into the Upper Peninsula, that built camps with their own bare hands. And that culture's dying.
Yeah.
Deer camp is dying.
Oh,
Camps
for
are
sure.
being sold. The properties are being sold if they can sell them. I mean, there's so many properties for sale up here that nobody wants.
Yeah.
And they're all camps. We are no longer a destination, and it breaks my heart, because like I talked about when I was a little boy, when I was 12 years old, I could not wait to go to the UP with my dad and with my uncles, because it was the land of giants, the land of mystery, the land of legends, the big woods of the great Upper Peninsula. And I got to experience those things as a boy. The rugged beauty and the unforgiving nature of the wild. And, we saw moose, we saw bears. One of the biggest bucks I ever seen in my life, I saw when I was 17 years old. You don't ever forget those things. And it shaped me. And what's hurt me the most is watching it die.
Yeah.
And it hasn't been quick. It's been a slow, agonizing death for 30 years.
Sure.
And, like I talked about earlier in the podcast, I got 4 sons. And what about them?
Mm-hmm.
The honest to God's truth is all this deer advocacy work I do with the advisory team, the trips to Lansing, all this stuff. It's not for me, because I probably won't see the benefits of all of these things in my lifetime, but my sons will.
Sure.
I guess I'm planting trees that I'll never enjoy the shade of, and I'm okay with that.
No, that's a powerful way to look at it. And I think more of us should look at a lot of things, not just hunting, because this isn't just about hunting for you. I can see that just by the way you're talking about it. It's not about even hunting for your kids. It's about a culture and a heritage that your kids might not ever get to see. And if something doesn't change, for sure, your kids' will never know what we knew just a couple of decades ago. And that's the wild part about it. I know things always change and things are always evolving, but there are certain things that are worth conserving. So, yeah, that was a pretty, I didn't intend for that to go that heavy, but man, that's, I see the passion and I respect it, Jordan, because, I definitely am I don't live up there. I spent a lot of time up there, but I have a true love for the entire state of Michigan, but the Upper Peninsula has always, and still, there's still a magical spark that's ignited in me anytime I go up there. And it is sad to go up there and see places that I can remember as a kid not being there anymore, because it's stuff that, was there anything special about that beef jerky? Hell no. But it was everything that built up to getting to that piece of beef jerky that made that beef jerky so special, right? So
Hear that.
So let's see here. Let's jump off of that. Let me see. What do I got here?
By the way, I have to ask this question.
Yeah.
Do you stop at Gustafson's?
Yes. It's off of 2, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Anytime I come south, man, Gustafson's is a must. I'm going to shamelessly plug them on this podcast because they have just a great little store there, family-owned business, great smoked fish, jerky. I stop there every single time. I love it.
Yeah, on the way through, because I did tell you when we were messaging back and forth, my oldest daughter fell so in love with the Upper Peninsula that when it came time for college, we visited a lot of different universities, and I took her up to Northern, and we spent 3 days up there, and she's like, yeah, this is where I'm going to school. I've got all the hiking, backpacking, Lake Superior. It's all right here. I don't need to go anywhere else. So that's where she went to school. But anytime I go up there, on the way through, I hit Gustafson's. On the way back, I hit it, and I usually eat all my smoked fish on the way, and then coming back through, I get enough to try to make it back home. So, so let's talk about something that isn't just affecting the Upper Peninsula, but the entire state of Michigan. It's a hot topic item, and it's something that I definitely have an opinion on, and I'm going to reserve my opinion and let you tell me your thoughts on it. And that is getting rid of this combo tag and moving this state to a 1 buck tag state. What's your take on that?
Well, I'm going to be biased since I wrote the recommendation coming out of the DAT team, and my signature's on the document that I forwarded to you. I guess the first thing that I will say before I get too deep in that is the deer advisory team spent months, and I mean months, debating and discussing buck regulations, consulting in-state and out-of-state experts, our Michigan DNR, obviously, but we also had former head deer biologist from the state of Ohio, Dr. Mike Tonkovich, come in. As you know, Ohio's a 1 buck state, and he was kind enough to let us needle him with questions of all manner for hours. By the way, I can't say enough good about him. He is just an amazing man with a heart for our resources like you wouldn't believe, and I'm very, very grateful that he came and spent time with our team. So there was a lot of buildup with buck regulations. And as you can imagine, it's no different on our DAT team than it is around the bar top with 40 other hunters. You start talking about buck regs and the boxing gloves go on.
It becomes bare knuckle at that point in time.
Oh, yeah. Everybody's got an opinion, and the opinions are pretty steadfast. That being said, what really spoke to me was the tremendous percentage of support for going to a 1 buck system across our DAT team. Typically, we do not craft recommendations together. We operate a little bit in a vacuum, because the UP is different than the LP, right? And the department recognized that by establishing 2 different teams. So usually we try to address peninsula specific issues, but this go round we took more of a collective holistic approach. And ultimately, the Lower Peninsula team passed 1 buck on an 84% approval margin, which is huge. The UP team passed it on a 60% approval margin. So cumulative between all 40 members of the DAT, we passed 1 buck through our team with a 72% approval rating, which exceeds super majority. Yeah. For a buck reg to get that kind of consensus, I was a bit surprised.
Yeah, I'm surprised to hear it. I thought it was going to be like a 60-40 at best.
51% with an
edge. Yeah. 51% with it. I'll tell your wife what you did at deer camp last month if you don't vote my way.
Right. So that was really something, and it was very special that our teams collaborated, and the Lower Peninsula Chair and myself, we both signed that document that I sent to you. It was a big deal, and we felt that it had a lot of unity and a lot of power to send that recommendation to the DNR and to the Natural Resources Commission, that all of these people representing interests and demographics all across the state of Michigan are saying with one voice, this is what we believe needs to happen. That hasn't happened before.
Sure.
That was pretty special.
So what is it? What do you think were the driving factors behind such a majority approval of jumping on board with the same issue? What do you think were the driving, not opinions, but, and they are opinions. At the end of the day, everything is opinion, whether there's science backing it up or not. But what were the hardest hitting points that drove it home to everybody that said this is the right move, not just for the UP, not just for the Lower Peninsula, but this is the right move for Michigan?
Well, when you sit down and you really break it down to its simplest elements, in the Upper Peninsula and in the Lower Peninsula, there are three things that we need to do to have a healthy deer herd. We need to back off the buck harvest. We need to take more antlerless where appropriate, and we need to improve habitat. Those are the big three overarching things that we have to do across the state of Michigan. As you're aware, we're a very buck-centric state.
Oh, yeah.
And we have a very long, rather ugly history of shooting the snot out of bucks and not doing so good on the scorecard with does.
Yep.
And that is also true across both peninsulas. There's a lot of old camp lore ideology up here that you don't shoot does. You don't ever do that. That's like the holy cow in India. That's how some folks view the doe up here. No, we don't shoot the does. The ideology being that we want more deer and does make babies, so we don't shoot the deer that make babies. That's a whole nother discussion. That's a biological fallacy. It doesn't boil down that simple. But getting back to the one buck, the reasoning, it fits in both peninsulas for different reasons. In the UP, we have a shortage of bucks because we have a very high buck mortality rate, which is largely attributable to a lack of survivable condition, poor nutrition, and insanely bad buck to doe ratios, which draws out your rut 3 times what it should be. So our bucks are heading into the teeth of winter locked out of any meaningful nutrition with 0 gas in the tank, and they simply don't survive.
Sure.
Just for perspective, your average hunted public land herd is probably going to have a ratio of about 4-to-1 if it's reasonably healthy. I'd be pretty comfortable telling you that broad spectrum across the UP, and there's areas that are better and there's areas that are worse, but just broad spectrum, we're probably looking at a preseason ratio of 12-to-1.
Wow.
3 times what it should be. So here's where it starts to get scary. In a healthy herd where the ratio is 4-to-1, a breeding buck will lose roughly 1/3 of his body mass index during the course of a breeding phase. So if you triple the breeding duties, what's 3 times 1/3?
Yeah. He's gonna be skin and bones.
It don't math.
He'll breed himself to death before winter even gets a hold of him, probably.
That is absolutely accurate. And of course, we have a suite of apex predators that's licking their chops for a deer that's lethargic and emaciated and can't really fight off. That increases depredation. There's a host of reasons that play into this, and we've got a deadly cocktail of issues. But we need more bucks on the landscape. We need to take more does where appropriate. So it fits for the UP if the combo tag is 1 buck and 1 doe. Now for the LP, again, there's areas that are probably similar to the UP where deer densities are lower. I still think preserving bucks in those instances is good. And then you get areas like over in the Thumb. I've heard numbers knocking on 200 deer per square mile in isolated areas over there. You got to incentivize antlerless harvest. So looking at harvest data from the DNR, they suggest that the average Michigan hunter wants something like 1.4 to 1.5 deer per person annually. Well, if you go to one buck and one doe, the 0.4 or the 0.5 becomes antlerless
Sure.
automatically.
Yep.
So it certainly will, to some measure, incentivize antlerless harvest. Now, I'm not saying it's going to make believers out of people who are just never going to shoot does, because those guys are probably just immovable.
Yeah.
But I think we'd see a bump. And I guess the biggest thing I want to say before we get any grittier with that is, one buck is not the answer. And I'll say that again. One buck is not the answer. I don't care what regulation you put in place with bucks. I don't care if it was MAPRs or earn a buck, whatever it is not the answer. The buck regulation is just one slice of a pie. There are all kinds of issues and factors at play, and it's called deer management, not buck management.
Yeah.
So a buck reg is just a sliver. It's something that's going to help. It's not a silver bullet.
No, I can agree with that. And so I've kind of been on both sides of the fence on the one buck thing. And to be honest with you, it's because of the type of hunting that I do. I personally love having the ability to take 2 bucks because I love to travel. So I'll never shoot more than 1 buck off of my 60 acres unless something dramatically changes with the deer numbers, which I don't see, regardless of how well we can work management. I just don't ever see a situation where it's going to warrant me taking more than 1 off my 60. But then I can jump in my car and I can drive 100 miles and I can go, spend a couple weekends chasing one on public land. So I've always loved the ability to take 2 bucks. And APRs don't mean anything to me because, to be honest with you, and certain people aren't going to like this, I'm not shooting anything smaller than 4-point on one side anyway. So if they put a APR on both tags of 4 or more points, it's not going to change the way I hunt. But then the more I started thinking about it, and trying to take it out of my own personal wants and looking at it for a part of the puzzle that's going to be better for the herd, the more I got on board with an OBR. Does it mean that I'm not going to necessarily travel? If I shoot one on my property on October 17th, does that mean I'm not going to travel 100 miles to go chase a buck on public land? Probably. I mean, obviously, if it's an OBR, I can't do that. But am I going to spend more time on the properties that are close to home, taking out a doe or two? Yeah, I definitely will. I'm right in that number. I want to have 2 deer in my freezer from the state of Michigan every year, and hopefully 1 from another state. If I can get 2 to 4 deer in my freezer a year, that feeds my family, and it gives me plenty of opportunity to go out and chase these critters, which I love to do. So from a selfish perspective, I didn't necessarily want to see the OBR because I didn't want to lose my opportunity to go travel to other spots in Michigan to chase deer, or to chase bucks. But then, like I said, to look at it as not the solution, which I 100% agree with you. It's not the sole solution, but it is a piece of the puzzle to get us on the right track. I felt it's the right move for the state of Michigan. And I'll take it a step further. In my own personal opinion, I think there are areas in the southern lower peninsula where that 1 buck tag, and a lot of people aren't going to like this, but we should really strongly consider making that buck tag an earn a buck tag. If you want to sit there and complain year over year that you're overrun with does, something's got to give, guys. I don't believe you're taking as many as you should be if you're going to continue. I mean, for crying out loud, you have 10 doe tags. You can get 10 doe tags. You can take an 11th with your combo tag. What's going on, guys? Like, I don't know. I'm not there, but the math doesn't math to me. And I've got a buddy to what you were just talking about in the thumb, a really good friend of mine. He's a disabled veteran, and he goes into the thumb every year for it's a disabled veterans hunt. and he's been going there for years, and he takes 2, 3, 4 doe every year when he goes there. And every year he comes back and says, dude, I saw more deer this year than I saw last year. That tells me something's not right, guys. If a guy's traveling from Newaygo to the Thumb and he's shooting 3 or 4 a year and he's seeing more every year, then what's the average guy over there that's hunting? What is he shooting? You know what I mean? So
my trip this last spring, I shot 17 does.
yeah.
The first time I went down there, I was floored. Opening night, me and my buddy went out. I think we knocked over, and this was like 3 years ago. I think we knocked over 7 opening night. And being from the UP, I'm kind of wringing my hands like, oh my God, what did we just do here?
Yeah, you're feeling like sick to your stomach, like I don't shoot that many in a decade up here.
Right. I'm like, holy cow, we just murdered this place. I was feeling a little guilty. So my buddy brings a side-by-side down the edge of the field because there's a bunch of soybeans planted. So we just pick the deer up and get them out of the bean field off the side, throw them in side-by-side. So we're loading all these dead deer in the side-by-side, and 50 yards away, here comes 5 more. And my buddy looks at me, he's like, you want to make it 8? Like, are you serious? I said, yeah, go ahead. Okay. Boom. Drop another one through it. And I'm just beside myself still. I'm like, what kind of fantasy land am I living in down here? This is nuts.
Right.
So we get back to the barn that night. We talk to the farmer, which was eye-opening. Long story short, it's dark. It's pitch black at this point. And we pulled down the dirt road by the farmer's house. And the field that we were just shooting all these deer in would be immediately to our right. And as we pulled out of the driveway and the headlights panned across this field, there were eyes everywhere. It was staggering. This was the field we just went and murdered all these does in.
Yeah.
And we didn't make a dent. We did nothing. We counted over 100 deer just in the headlights that night in the short few mile ride from the farm to my buddy's house. And I was beside myself.
Sure.
And he says to me, now you understand the problem.
Yeah. I mean, that's crazy.
We cannot kill enough deer to matter.
No. And you got the doe group in the woods waiting. Karen just got shot. We can finally head out there. She's not going to run us off the field. So, yeah, I've never hunted in the Thumb, but I do a lot of travel for my 9 to 5, and I travel all over the country, but I spend a lot of time traveling through between Newaygo and Detroit because I have a lot of clients over in the Detroit area, and I'm floored when I get on I-96 and I cruise east and I get, once I get to about Portland, Michigan, from there on east, I'm floored by the amount of deer I see. And I'm like, where are all these deer 40 miles from here? They're just, it's crazy how big it changes. And I'm not saying, and I hope people that are listening, if you live in that area, I hope I'm not coming off as nobody out there is doing anything about it, because I believe there's definitely people out there that are like, man, it doesn't matter. Like you just said, I could kill 50 of them and it's not going to matter. That's where I think it goes back to that cultural part of Michigan, which I don't care what part of Michigan you are. And if you deny it, you're lying. Let's say if you're over the age of 38 years old and you deny this, you're in denial. I grew up with a little bit of I don't want to say like I was looked down on when I shot a doe, but it was like, yeah, that'll eat good. But if I shot a 4-point, it was like, oh, you got a nice buck there, and it's like
that weighed 50 pounds less than the doe.
Exactly, yeah. So, I still think that's deeply ingrained in the culture here, and I think that's part of the fight, and I think it's, I don't think you can have any meaningful change without things happening that are going to piss me off, that are going to piss you off, that are going to piss off the guy who doesn't want to shoot a doe. There's things that are going to irritate us all in the policy, and it's sacrifices that I think ultimately are going to have to be made. And it doesn't mean we're going to get it all right in the next 4 years. Things might have to change, but things have to change, or we're just heading for a mess. So
I want to throw one more data point at you before we kind of get back to that buck drag thing.
yeah,
We went down a really good rabbit hole. According to the latest information from the DNR, 80% of Michigan hunters are not shooting even one doe.
that tells you all you need to know right there.
20% of guys are out there wearing out 2 pairs of boots, man, doing way more than their share. 80% are not taking even one doe. I mean, we don't have to go any further with the data to realize that's unhealthy.
Yeah.
And when we do that over decades upon decades upon decades, it's not good for the resource.
No.
And I'm really concerned with our culture in how we have devalued the doe. You know, and I give guys a little bit of shit about this because you hear guys all the time, like, well, I only hunt mature deer. I hunt mature deer. Well, they don't hunt mature deer. They hunt mature bucks.
Yeah.
You've never heard anybody say, dude, you got to check out this nanny doe I got on camera. She's got to be 7 years old. Look at this. Look at this freezer queen. Nobody does that.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm going to tell you, that's the smartest damn deer in the woods.
Oh, yeah.
You want to challenge yourself, especially as a bow hunter, hunt a matriarchal doe.
I would 100%. They're a different breed. Yeah. They're tough to kill.
So, you know, I just like to kind of have fun with the guys who are, you know, the bro hunters, so to speak, you know, always popping off about mature bucks. I'm like, well, what about mature does? And they all turn and look like, what did you say?
Yeah.
But anyway, getting back to the one buck thing, you know, a lot of guys have a problem with the reg at face value because they go to DNR data and they say, well, you know, the data says only 5% of Michigan hunters, you know, plus minus, are taking a second buck. So what's that matter? Well, there's 2 parts to this. The first is, if you're familiar with investments, some guys like to play high risk stocks. Some guys are more comfortable with a low interest yield CD. It might be a 5% yield, we'll say. So it's going to accumulate you money more slowly over time, but it's secure.
Sure.
So if we save 20,000 bucks, which is what the 5% roughly comes out to, plus minus. If we save 20,000 bucks a year for 5 years, that's 100,000 bucks on the landscape in 5 years. The cumulative effect is huge. Now there's going to be some bonehead out there that, you know, if one buck goes through, the very next year he's going to say, well, it didn't work. It's useless. But you got to give it time.
It's not going to happen overnight for sure.
No. So the cumulative savings is there, and I think it's important to point out that it will take time. The second thing is, and this one's even more important, everybody gets hung up on the data all the time. They want to put all these deer regs into nice, neat little spreadsheets, pie charts, and bar graphs, and talk it to death. The biggest influence on harvest, whether it's buck or doe, is hunter mindset.
Yeah.
So if I have 2 buck tags in my pocket and I'm the average Joe hunter, past practices, it's 8:30 in the morning. It's November 15th. Here comes that little basket 5-point or 6-point. Boom! I got my buck.
Yep.
Now I'm going to wait for a good one.
Yep. You didn't wait though.
Never mind, you know, the 10 does that walk through before that. Circling back to that issue. I'm doe shaming people. They're going to shoot that air quotes meat buck. And then they're going to spend the rest of their season, whatever it is. And I'm not just picking on firearm hunters, because you bow hunters out there, you can be guilty of the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
Then they're going to wait for the good one. But if they don't have the mulligan buck, and they're starting the season October 1 with just 1 buck tag, I don't think that basket rack dies. There's some guys that are going to do that. And you know what? If you're proud of that deer and that basket 5 makes your heart skip a beat, God bless you, brother.
Yeah, take
God
care.
bless you. But I think most hunters are going to take a look through the scope and go, nah, no way. 8:30, November 15th, nah.
Yeah.
They're going to let them go.
I mean, I'll take it a step beyond that as a diehard bow hunter. I've got bucks on my wall in this very studio that I'm in that if I only had one buck tag, there's a couple 115-inch 8-points in here that probably would have got a pass from me because I've got a 130-incher out there. Not saying that's everybody, but just looking at it from my own personal perspective, I've got deer mounted on my wall that I'm very proud of that I probably would have let take the pass, or maybe not shot them on October 15th and maybe shot them on December 17th instead. So you never know.
I think that influence that one buck exerts on the psychology of the hunter and the harvest choices they're going to make is potentially immeasurably immense. And really, where we're failing, and this is where I'm going to piss some folks off. It's not a regulatory failure. It's a culture problem.
Yeah.
It's our failure as stewards. And regulations are just a tool to try to steer people to be good stewards, to make good choices, to do the right things. And unfortunately, Michigan has a very ugly history. If you look back through the pages, we don't self-regulate very well.
That's just human nature. I mean, I don't know if you follow much of what I put on social media, and I post quite frequently through my Wild Spirits Outdoors page, and weekly I put out, almost weekly, there's weeks I miss, but I put out what I call a wild take. And some of what I put out is my own personal passion and opinion on things. Some of it is me trying to put it on and look at it through the lens of an average hunter. But one thing that I look at on that when I'm putting those posts out there is the biggest enemy to us Michigan hunters is not the regulations. It's us. It's our own unwillingness to change our mindset and our culture about what we want to do. Nobody
Absolutely.
likes to be told no. And if you tell somebody they can do something, and I think if I look back on this, the post that I was talking about had to do with something that pissed me off to no end was when they started allowing all firearms into the muzzleloader season. As a guy who loved to bow hunt, I love to rifle hunt. And I never will dog on rifle hunting, guys. I don't mind rifle hunting either, but my passion is the intimacy I get from a bow and arrow and the intimacy I get from a muzzleloader. Those are my two passionate parts of hunting. It wasn't about the kill. It was how close can I get, to make this happen. And when they did that, what I felt like, and I don't remember what the post I put out there was, but I said something to the effect of, let's, God forbid we put muzzleloading back to muzzleloading. And somebody had made a comment on it that they said, you don't have to use a rifle during muzzleloader season. You can still use your muzzleloader. And I said, I understand that. But when I've got 15 neighbors within a half a mile of me, and I'm listening to .6s barking 3 or 4 rounds off at a time during muzzleloader season, I don't feel like I'm muzzleloader hunting anymore. And if you tell somebody they can do something, over time, people are going to start doing the thing you told them that they can do because it's easier. That's my take on that.
My old man, from the time I was very young, imbued into me that stewardship is an action word. There are requirements of us as stewards of the land. And all too often, I think that the average rank and file hunter is more worried about what he can take than what he can give.
Yep.
And what's giving look like? Well, giving might be letting that basket rack walk. Giving might be doing the hard labor and shooting 10 does off your property because you got 60 of them.
Yeah.
That's tough work. That's giving. And I'm not going to sit here and be all self-righteous and pretend that I don't love chasing a big buck, because I sure do. I sure do. It gets the heart pumping. It keeps you in your stand on the days that are absolutely miserable. We all love antlers, and anybody that says otherwise is lying to your face.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that.
But we have a divine mandate to be good stewards. I don't know if you're religious, man. The good book says it this way: that God gave man dominion over the fish of the sea, the fowl of the air, and the beast of the field.
Yes,
Well,
sir.
what does dominion mean? Well, that's a responsibility. That's a divine mandate from God himself. I am giving you charge over these things.
That's a responsibility. Yeah.
Yes,
Yep.
absolutely. And I think that hunting culture has become terribly, terribly selfish. The thing is, when we get into these discussions about regulations, most of the conversation is not driven with biology. It's driven with personal anecdotes. Well, where does that come from? Well, I want things to be this way. What if we stopped looking at it from the lens of what we want and ask the reverse question? What do the deer need?
Yeah.
Because we're doing it backwards. If you put the hunter first, if you put hunter satisfaction, hunter wants ahead of the resource, you're going to destroy the resource. Conversely, if you place the resource first, the hunter will benefit every single time from
Sure.
a healthy, robust, well-managed resource.
Yeah.
We're doing it backwards. And if you ask me, Jordan, well, what's the problem with the state of Michigan? That's it. We have spent decades managing for hunter satisfaction, being afraid to piss people off, and not putting the resource first. That is where we have failed.
And the funny thing about it, and in doing that, in attempting to pacify the hunter, we have driven the sport so far away from what the hunter wants that we're losing the hunter because of it. It's almost ironic that in that attempt to pacify people, we've actually driven people away from it.
Is that the way it always works when you try to keep everyone happy? No one's happy.
What is it? The road to hell is paved with good intentions. I mean, I'm not one of those guys who's going to sit here and be like, there's this dark conspiracy over the state of Michigan to destroy a heritage or destroy the hunting culture. Do I think there's people out there that would love to see that go away? Absolutely. Do I think there's people that get put in positions of power that would love to see that go away? Absolutely. But I don't think 99% of what is done with an intention to destroy the hunting heritage. It's done with the intent to pacify the squeaky wheel, and in turn has really put a detrimental effect on the culture and the heritage of hunting. It's the hunter themselves ultimately that we're digging our own grave. And I'm guilty of it. As I'm not going to sit here on some high horse and say I'm not. I mean, there's plenty of times where I could go, shoot a doe out here on some public land by my house where I drive by and see 6, 7 of them in the field every single night. And instead I drive 40 miles to go a mile deep on some public and chase a 120-inch buck. That's me doing what I want to do versus what would be more beneficial to the herd. So I'm not going to say that I'm not guilty of that as well. It's just it's an interesting when you try to really step back from it and look at it from a lens outside your own, it can actually start opening your eyes to thinking about, at least for me, I can be a little bit hypocritical about this stuff too, and I'm coming from a place of good intention, but I'm no different than the people that are making those regulations at the end of the day.
Well, and that's something I want to point out too, is we can make whatever regulations the NRC wants to go with, the DNR wants to go with. Ultimately, it's not the DNR, it's not the NRC, and it's sure as hell not the deer advisory team that has a say in that moment of truth. that is yours.
Yeah.
When you're looking down the bow sight at full draw, when you're looking through the rifle scope and you're squeezing down, you are the tool of deer management. You are judge, jury, executioner in that moment, and no one can make you squeeze that trigger or loose that arrow. That is your decision. And I think that we need to do a better job of taking total ownership of the consequences of the decisions that we make. And I think that a lot of guys get really, 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 really hung up on the regulations. And I hear it all the time. Well, hunting would be better in the state if the DNR wasn't ruining it, or the bureaucrats in the NRC are ruining it. Again, yeah, they can make regulations that maybe don't make sense, but it still comes down to the man or woman behind the bow or behind the gun. No matter what, we cannot escape that truth. And these state agencies and bureaucracies, they're not blameless. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like they're walking on water and doing everything right.
Sure.
There's room for improvement. There's room for reform. But we as hunters, when are we going to step up to the plate and shoulder the responsibility for the decisions that we make? Because we're culpable in this as well.
Yeah. No, I don't want to just sit here and do this the whole episode, but you're right in line with my train of thought. And like I said, I'm as guilty of it as the next guy is. When I look at certain things, we're flowing through this so beautifully that it was unintended. But my next topic was actually to segue into the NRC, and you just kind of pulled us right into that, because no, they're definitely not blameless, and they're not without their own. They've got their hand in the cookie jar too. So I 100% agree that us hunters, we have to take some onus for what's actually going on. We need to take our chops. If we really want to fix things, we're going to have to take a couple of jabs to the face and be like, yeah, we're a part of the problem. So going back to one of the first things you said is, you're either part of the problem or part of the solution. And again, sitting on the sidelines and just bitching to your buddies about it, it's not going to change anything. Is my little podcast that, gets 1,500 views a week, is it going to change anything? Maybe not, but it's a step for me to have an opportunity to talk to guys like you, to try to get perspectives out there that, hopefully somebody listens to this and maybe they got mad for the first hour of listening to us talk, but maybe something triggered and they're like, you know what? The guy's an asshole, but he makes a good point. Like maybe I've got a little more skin in the game than I want to admit. So now let's get to everybody's favorite topic. Let's talk about the NRC. Let's talk about what the NRC's purpose was and what the reality of what the NRC is. And I'm not an expert. I know the NRC has been around much, much longer than people knew what those three letters even meant. I believe the NRC's been around in the state of Michigan since like the 20s. I don't know if that's accurate. But it really didn't become a part of the vernacular of deer hunting until really Prop G. So from your perspective and from the people you've been able to talk to, what was the original intent of the NRC, and is the NRC fulfilling what its intent was?
Oh, yeah. This is the gritty part of the podcast. Here we go. So, the first thing I want to start off with before I answer your questions is I talk to thousands of hunters around the state of Michigan about natural resources issues, deer issues predominantly. And I'm always trying to urge people to get engaged. And one thing I see and hear so often when I'm in conversation, I'll say, well, the DNR, blah, blah, blah. And someone will say, no, the NRC. No, the DNR deals with this over here. The NRC deals with that over there. People don't understand at all the inner workings and the hierarchy of NRC versus DNR. And some people even think they're the same thing. So I want to begin by just establishing that the Natural Resources Commission is a 7-member body appointed by the governor. There are 3 Democrats, there are 3 Republicans, and 1 independent appointed at any given time. And those individuals are the governing body for natural resources issues in the state of Michigan. I think the language out of the document says something like sole authority to govern season, manner, method to take, bag limit, etc. So the NRC actually crafts the regulations, the natural resources laws that we have in the state of Michigan. They create it. Now, the Department of Natural Resources is more or less advisory in capacity to the commission.
Advisory and enforcement, right?
Yes, yes. So the department will bring forward a recommendation on whatever, lake trout. And they'll present their data, their facts, their evidence, and they'll delineate to the commission that our position on this regulatory change would be opposed, in favor, or neutral, based upon the biological evidence. And then it's up to the commission to do their own homework, to converse with the department, to examine the data, and then make a sound science-based decision at the end of the day, whatever that reg should be. So that's kind of the 10,000-foot view of how that works. The DNR itself does not write its own ticket and just create regs. That's not how it works. The commission creates the regs. The DNR advises and enforces. So getting back, the purpose of the NRC. So they were supposed to be the sentries in the night, if you will, that protected and preserved our natural resources and our hunting, fishing, outdoor heritage in the state of Michigan. In my opinion, man, what a tremendous honor to be able to do that, hey? That's a special position. And that's a tremendous charge. I like the idea. I like the heart, the intent of what it was supposed to be. But I think we both know it hasn't always been so. And there's perhaps been a fall from grace. You know, it's rather ironic to me. A large part of the heart and soul of Proposal G was to separate natural resources from politics. So what do? The people who are supposed to protect and preserve are politically appointed.
Yeah.
Isn't that a bit of a contradiction of terms?
A little bit.
Dear Fox, please guard the hens. Don't take any eggs. I'll be back after lunch. Yeah, that's a tough pill to swallow. And, you know, obviously, as state government and the political scene ebbs and flows, it kind of determines what kind of commission you have, right? I'm going to say it, elections have consequences.
100%. Especially when those elections are creating appointments to a board that's going to be making massive impacts to the entire state.
Absolutely. And I'm going to hit that point real quick since it's teed up. Hunters, fishermen, and outdoorsmen in the state of Michigan need to do a lot better job at being politically engaged. And I know it's not fun. It's not sexy. It's not something that people like. And a lot of us, quite frankly, we enjoy the outdoors to get away from that kind of crap. We don't enjoy the political rhetoric and the political theater. It's obscene. And I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. Both sides are guilty. I'll just say that.
100%. 100%.
So when you fail to politically engage as a hunter, you're ensuring your own demise. If you have no stake in who represents you, I assure you they won't represent you.
Yeah, it's a pretty simple way to put it, and it's pretty factually accurate.
So, you know, I would just encourage our sportsmen that are listening, if you don't know your state rep, you don't know your state senator, start right there. Start right there. I don't even care if they're of the opposing party and you don't like the R's or the D's or whatever the case. I don't care. You need to know those people. You need to open a dialogue with those people. And you need to make it very clear to them how much our hunting, fishing, outdoor heritage means to you and the types of things that you want to see done to preserve and protect it.
Sure.
That's part of stewardship too. Again, stewardship is an action word. It goes beyond the field. It goes beyond the woods. It goes beyond the lake. And the political realm is part of that. So politics in the commission, yeah, there's no denying, right? It is a political rule. And like it or not, politics are here to stay within the realm of natural resources management in the state of Michigan. And I spent probably the first 3 years of my involvement in advocacy work beating my head against this moral wall because I got a little bit of a look behind the curtain and I'm like, this is disgusting and shameful. I'm like, I'm not playing. I'm taking my ball. I'm going home. I don't play like this. Well, what was the result? I got nothing done.
Yeah.
I got nothing done. As disgusting as this is to say, there are two paths forward. You play the game or you lose the game. That's it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you, the anti-hunting groups out there, and some of our listeners might have been privy to some of this, watching what's going on with the coyotes in the last couple of years. The anti-hunters are showing up. They're speaking up. They're well-funded. And I don't care if you agree with what they say, what they had to say. Obviously, we don't. We're hunters, right? But the fact is, they're putting asses in seats and they're putting money behind their cause.
I was just about to, when you started getting into this, I was just about to say, if you're an outdoorsman, a fisherman, a hunter, maybe you don't hunt and you could give a rat's ass what the hunting regs are in Michigan, but you love to go trout fishing or you love to go backpacking through the porcupines in the UP. I promise you there is a group out there that is putting way more asses in the stands and making way bigger of a stink than you are to take away your opportunity and your right to go do that. So
100%.
I'm not a huge fisherman. I'm a fair weather fisherman, but I want to protect people's rights to go fish.
Absolutely.
Fishermen, you need to do the same for the hunters. Backpackers, even if you don't want to kill that beautiful little Bambi you see when you're out there hiking, if you want to continue to enjoy that hike, you need to get behind the hunters and the fishermen. We need to unite and we need to play the game, like you said, because right now we're all in our own little, we got the A team, the B team, and the C team, and we're all just kind of sitting there on the sidelines and we're all bitching, look at these dumbasses out here throwing a big stink about this and throwing a big stink about that. Well, those dumbasses that are throwing that big stink are getting shit done that's not good for us, regardless of whether
done on a policy level as well.
Absolutely. So
it's a critical issue. And if you're one of those guys out there right now that's kind of laughing and saying, wow, they're making more of this than it is, the purple-haired people aren't a threat. You are dead wrong. Dead wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And it is that disposition, that apathy that has allowed them to get a foothold. Because we slept on them.
Yeah.
We did. We stopped showing up to meetings because we all thought this way of life that we love so much, well, this is never going to go away. I mean, that would be insanity. Well, guess what?
It's going away, guys.
It can go
Or it
away.
can, yeah.
These things do not endlessly self-sustain. They have to be guarded. They have to be protected and watched over. We can't turn our backs. And the Natural Resources Commission is a very real, very tangible vector for Michigan hunters to engage. And I don't travel to every meeting. I travel to a handful of those meetings a year. I try to keep it to necessities because I'm over on the far northwest end of the UP, so it's not a short or a cheap ride.
No.
But that said, the commission has a monthly meeting. And it's long. It's going to run all day. And they're going to cover fisheries, and they're going to cover upland game, and they're going to cover deer or bear or whatever happens to be on the agenda. It could be a plethora of things. Land transactions. Those are opportunities for you to show up and speak to the commission for 5 minutes on whatever topic is your passion, whether it's steelhead, whether it's grouse, whether it's white-tailed deer, whether it's bears, whether it's trapping bobcats, I don't care. Show up.
Yeah.
Because the world is run by the people who show up. If you're not there, I promise you will not be heard.
Yeah.
It's that simple. Now, I understand that there's an impediment here, right? Because the Natural Resources Commission holds these meetings on a weekday morning when every blue collar man in the state of Michigan is doing what every other blue collar man is doing, which is working.
Which is 95% of the hunters and fishermen in this state.
Right. And so I understand the pushback, like, well, Jordan, I can't go to these meetings. I got to work. Yeah. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to prioritize based upon your passion, whatever it is your discipline is. Find out, do enough homework to know when those issues are going to be talked about with the commission. Burn that PTO day. Do it. Because the future of those things that you love might hang in the balance.
And that's powerful, man, because instead of taking 7 days in November to go hunt, take 6 days and save that day to go talk to these guys. So many people, and I hate talking about social media, but let's be honest, it is today's it's today's soapbox. You get on social media just like you would stand on your soapbox, and that's where you would the town square gathers around the ones that want to listen to you anyway, or the ones that want to argue with you, whatever it is. That's where they get engaged. And I hear so many people when I make comments like that, doesn't matter if I go, they're not gonna listen to me anyway. And I'm like, yeah, maybe not, but I tell you what, if you bring 4 buddies and this guy brings 3 buddies and we show up to an NRC meeting and 2-3 meetings later, they're like, we have to move venues because we've got people waiting outside in February, freezing their asses off. We need a bigger venue to at least get people inside. That's changing things. That is making a statement. That's going to get news reporters to show up because they got to have a story, and it's going to get them talking. It makes a difference, guys. Big picture, if your one alone voice isn't heard, that's a side issue. If you pack these things, the optics alone can change things.
Numbers matter.
So, numbers matter. So sorry to interrupt you there, but I had to make that statement.
Absolutely. And for the guys that just absolutely can't make it to the in-person meeting, which I'm going to encourage you very strongly, please do that. If you've never been, at least go one time, just to see how it works, to see the process, to hear what's said, to fellowship with other sportsmen. But if you absolutely can, you can still reach these people with an email, with a phone call.
Yep.
And some commissioners are better than others about responding. I think I've only had 2 commissioners ever that were unresponsive completely. And you have to understand that they're dealing with a plethora of issues across species all over the state of Michigan. So they're probably getting a lot of email. They're probably getting a lot of phone calls. But I will tell you what, if you think that it doesn't matter, you couldn't be more wrong. And right now, at this particular point in time, the commission that we have is something special.
Yeah.
It's something I haven't seen in the decade I've been doing this work.
Well, I'll tell you, as an outsider looking in who has never really gotten involved, because I was that guy who was like, it doesn't matter what I say, so I'm just going to go on my 60 acres and I'm going to do my thing and screw them. Kind of like that same guy who's like, just tell me where to send the freaking tax check and leave me the hell alone. That was me, so what I have seen from an outsider's perspective, I've seen way more actively requested engagement from the public, like actually reaching out, like, guys, we need to hear from you, show up. And now, at least as far as I can tell, and I'm sure you already know, they're going to live stream starting this this episode drops on the 10th, so tomorrow's meeting, February 11th, that will be the first live stream meeting, right?
Yeah, MECC used to do it, but that stopped, and now the state's going to pick it up and take care of it, which is probably the way it always should have been.
Yep. Cool. So let's back up to Prop G, and we're already over 2 hours in, man, and I'm only on like my second page of notes. So if at any point in time you're like, hey, man, I got to wrap this up, let me know and we can do a part two. But I'm going to keep running as long as you're willing to go.
Well, I got water in the cup. Let's grind.
Right on, man. So for the guys that are, let's say, 56-ish and older, they got to vote on Prop G. I was 13 when Prop G got voted on. I've done enough research on Prop G to understand what its purpose was. I feel like it was a noble cause. I feel like it was a step in the right direction. But has Prop G lived up to its expectations, in your opinion?
No, no, it has not. You know, this is where it's going to get really sticky. I think the heart and soul of Proposal G was to maintain the focus on the biological science. And I think that we've drifted away from biological science, and we now include things like social science. And what's social science? Well, in layman's terms, it's hunter satisfaction.
Yeah, it's feelings.
Right, it's feelings. Feelings can't be proven or disproven. They just are what they are.
Yep.
And I watched that happen to the Coyote boys not too long back. There were some real low-life individuals that threw them under the bus and came to a commission meeting with images of slain mother coyotes and gave tearful statements. And these are supposed sportsmen, which has made it even worse. Tearful statements about being concerned about the optics and the future of hunting and how we might be perceived. And on just a handful of individuals say so, it catapulted us into a 2-year-long, high-profile public relations nightmare, a lawsuit across 2 organizations. And ultimately, you know, the former chairman, I believe, was quietly excused. It was a mess. It was a disaster. And it was a mess and a disaster because we didn't follow the biological science. We deviated. We got in the weeds with feelings and emotions and all the whataboutisms. That's not Proposal G. I think that we've done ourselves a disservice. But unfortunately, the genie's out of the bottle.
Sure.
You know, there's language now, Proposal G has actually been modified, that includes social science as a recognized form of science. It's tough to come back from that.
Yeah.
And again, this goes back to hunter engagement. Leverage social science, because I'm telling you, you're not going to beat it in court. You're not. Leverage social science. How do you do that? Hack the meetings, overflow the emails, fill up the voicemails, be heard. Social science, use it.
Yeah.
That knife cuts both ways.
100%.
I do definitely think, though, that we've fallen away from what the original intent was, and a lot of natural resources decisions over the years, I feel, have been politicized, and in some cases heavily influenced by stakeholder groups.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a secret that there are a few stakeholder groups that have very deep pockets that can afford to make very handsome contributions to political campaigns and things of that nature, and that is a gruesome reality of some of the things that happen in the natural resources world. I'm not saying that's all of it, but it's part of it.
Yeah.
I talked earlier about being disgusted by some of the things I saw. It's things like that.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be able to buy influence.
No.
You shouldn't. You shouldn't. Again, place the resource first. I don't care if the Water Buffalo Association has a $3 million check in their hand. I don't give a damn. What's the biology? What's the science? Place the resource first. Put your check back in your pocket. Get out of my office.
Yeah, I think that's And I think that's what most sportsmen feel. And maybe that's a little bit of why there's that cynical leaning is, I don't have anything to give to this, so I'm not going to be listened to, versus the, basically the super PAC that's got a 6-figure check that they can hand to somebody for the favor that they want, or the leaning towards their decisions that they want. Which brings, we're flowing through this so awesome, Jordan. It's almost, I put show notes together, but I don't even think they were necessary, because my next topic was this one's always interests me, and it's such a tough one, at least in my mind, because anytime you add more complexities or more layers to the onion, things get dirtier, things get more confusing. There's just more that has to go into it. But here's my take on it, and this is coming from, let's look at it from 13-year-old me when Prop G was voted on. What's the difference between voting for Prop G and then having a governor pick the 7 people that are going to make these decisions, versus what it was prior to that, when you had a director of the Department of Natural Resources making these very same decisions? Like, is it worth the conversation, or do you ever see a benefit of the NRC positions being elected positions versus appointed positions, or does that get into the weeds of who has the right to vote on that? If you don't have this is where it'll get a little interesting for certain folks that might be listening, but I understand we all have a right to vote for things once we turn 18, but I still maintain, like, if you don't have any skin in the game, if you're not living it, what gives you the right to vote on it? So, and that goes for me. Like, I don't feel like I have a right to vote on what's going to happen in the city of Detroit. I don't freaking know. I don't live there. I have no idea the inner workings of what's going on in Detroit. So I feel like I don't have any position to vote on that. Now, conversely, from a hunting and fishing standpoint, I feel like I've got plenty of skin in the game, and it affects me in a very deep level. So I feel like I do have skin in the game to vote on that. But how would that work? Could it work? Or is the current system that we have for the appointment probably the best way to move forward? Just given the additional layers of red tape and bureaucracy that adding an additional layer to this could bring.
Well, the first thing I'm going to begin with is a question. If you want to run for elected office, whether it's House of Representatives, State Senate, U.S. Congress, President of the United States, you're going to need a shitload of money right off the get-go.
Yep.
Show me anything that politics and money has touched that it hasn't screwed up.
That's a fair point.
Isn't that the issue we're already facing? Politics and money?
Yep.
I don't know that we gain anything. I think that there will be some very wealthy individuals, if NRC seats were elected, who would basically be able to buy the office, and someone like you who's passionate, lived their whole life in the great state of Michigan, raising up a family here, living the life, you will never have a chance, ever. Because you don't have the money, you don't have the political influence that comes with the money, and you're screwed. What kind of people are we going to get if that's the case? Would they be better than what we have? I don't think so. The other side of this is you have to consider what opening this up to a vote does. Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb will decide.
That's a great point.
Period.
Just like they decide everything that's a state matter. I mean, it all comes out of the southeastern portion of the state. So,
what's your percentage of diehard outdoorsmen, hunters, fishermen, conservative-minded individuals in those counties compared to the other side of the fence? I think you know.
Yeah, that's a great point.
We lose.
Yeah.
You know, an issue, for example, like wolf management here in the UP. Put that on the ballot and let Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb vote. I promise you we're not getting the wolf hunt.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
The system that we have is the way it needs to stay. But it is flawed, as we already discussed. So the rational mind is saying, Jordan, you're talking in circles. You're saying our system that we have now is broken, but you're shooting this guy's suggestion down. Okay, smart guy, what's your suggestion? Well, here it is. Sportsmen are not putting their resume in the stack for NRC commissioner seats. That's why you don't have sportsmen most of the time on the NRC. You get guys that are maybe recreational. Well, yeah, I like to steelhead fish in the spring or whatever. Well, yeah, I buy a deer license. The guy hunts 3 days a year, whatever. Most of the people appointed to the commission historically are not diehard sportsmen. They're not blue collar folks. They're not our people.
Yeah. They're CEOs. They're
attorneys.
They're movers and shakers with deep pockets themselves.
Right. So why would you expect a body comprised of people that is not like us to make decisions that favor us? It's insanity. Well, how do we fix that? Put resumes in the stack that are sportsmen. Well, how do you do that, Jordan? It's a governor appointment. Well, we're back to elections have consequences. Okay. I have a certain view, and I'm just gonna throw it out there. I tend to be a more conservative right kind of guy. That's typically the way I'm going to vote, because for me, those values generally tend to align more closely with my own. Not always.
Yeah.
I think both sides of the spectrum, as I said earlier, have their problems. But for me, that's where I land. That doesn't mean I can't sit across the table from someone who's a diehard Democrat and have a civil conversation if they want to do that. I sure can.
Sure.
But when you have a Republican governor, for example, you're much more likely, in my opinion, to see appointments reflect our values. Now, there's Democratic sportsmen out there for sure, right? I'm not saying there's not. But generally speaking, I think the right side kind of tends to gravitate towards hunting, fishing, and the outdoors. Not always, generally. And when you have those kind of appointments coming down, it makes a world of difference. It really does. Now, how does the Michigan sportsman get their resume in that stack? Well, you can go online, michigan.gov. And if you're so inclined, you think, you know what, I would make a darn good NRC commissioner. Put your name in. Michigan.gov, boards and committees. You can apply. You can do it all online. You know what? I'll do you one better. Maybe it's not you, but you know a guy at your local sportsman's club. He's well-spoken. He's been a hunter for 40 years in the state of Michigan. He teaches hunter safety. He's just salt of the earth guy. Go and talk to him and say, Frank, you need to be a commissioner. You need to fill out the paperwork. You need to go talk to Senator so-and-so. We need you.
Yeah.
We don't do that right now. We don't do that.
No. And to add on to what you just said, I'm all for encouraging anybody who feels like that's their calling to throw their hat in the ring. But don't do it lightly. Don't take it lightly. You are taking on a massive responsibility. You are essentially the voice of the voiceless at that point in time. So don't just throw your hat in the ring because you felt like on Tuesday night it was the right thing to do. Pray on it, think on it, and take it with the gravity it deserves. Because if you are fortunate enough to get that opportunity, I don't know, because I've never been in that position, but I feel like a tremendous weight you would feel. At least I feel like I would feel a tremendous weight on my shoulders representing the sportsmen of Michigan, because it is this freaking state was built on this stuff. I mean, the fur trappers in my family lineage go back to, freaking the 1700s. I mean, if you look at it from that lens, it's a tremendous weight on your shoulders. So don't take that lightly. Make sure if you're doing it with the intent to be all in on it.
But that's my advice, is to work within the system that we have and start putting good resumes in the stack of people that live the life, that represent us, that share our values, our ethos, our passion for continuing this way of life. And when you see appointments that begin to reflect those values, you'll see change like you've never seen.
Yeah.
I do want to say this about our present commission, though. And I said I was pretty optimistic earlier, but I want to reiterate that. There are some good folks right now serving on the commission that are hunters, that are fishermen. Maybe not as diehard as some of us are, but they're pretty decent. And the lady, Becky Humphreys, who's the chairwoman right now, she's a biologist. She used to be DNR director many, many, many years ago. We have never had a biologist at the helm. And I think that matters.
Sure.
I'm very optimistic about the present composition of the commission. But people have to understand that these are 2-year appointments also. So people are constantly coming and going off of the commission on a rotational basis. We're going to get new commissioners. And it's important to stay abreast of that and track that. And, you might build a relationship with whatever, Commissioner John Smith, and then he cycles out. Well, now what? We'll get in there and build a new relationship. Talk to the other commissioners. It really is a never-ending process we have to stay engaged in, and it's very difficult. It's not everybody's cup of tea. I get it. I mean, I've been doing this work for over a decade, so to me, it's second nature. But if we can just get more people engaged and get more good resumes in the stack, I think that we can turn the ship with the system that we have, and we can see positive results. I don't think it's damaged beyond repair. The question is, what is our willingness to repair it?
Sure. No, that's a good way to look at it. Do you see any benefit, maybe not to taking this to an election, but has there ever been, to your knowledge, any discussion, or do you see any benefit to having maybe 3 or 4 different boards within the NRC? One that's focused on like marine and fisheries, one that's focused on maybe upland and small game, one that's focused on our 3 primary big game species being whitetail, bear, and elk, and then maybe one that's solely focused on predator management? Or does that again add more and more layers to the onion and more red tape and bureaucracy?
So they actually just did this in the last year. They subdivided into a fisheries, wildlife, and parks and rec grouping of subcommittees. So there is a cognizance of a need to specialize, because you've got all kinds of commissioners with different backgrounds, right? And it doesn't make any sense for the steelhead guy to be working on bears. He doesn't know nothing about bears, but he might be useful in fisheries. And I think that there's been a recognition of that, and they're trying to put commissioners in subcommittees that are to their strength. So I think that will help.
Good. Do you think, do you see any drawbacks to trying to create these subcommittees? Do you think it might create maybe lengthier decision making? And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Sometimes it might take 2 years to come up with a good decision. I'd rather have somebody come in fully committed after 2 years of thinking about something versus being like, oh, I've only got 6 weeks to figure this out, so I'm going to make a knee-jerk decision. But do you see any drawbacks to those subcommittees?
I don't necessarily know that I do, but the jury's out. This is a relatively new concept within the commission, so I'm going to be observing it carefully and seeing how that functions real world versus conceptually. I think it's too early to make a judgment.
Sure.
I will say, I for one would like to see more definitive meetings. I would like to see more decisive action, because I think a lot of Michigan hunters, especially, have been really frustrated over a span of years. You hear the phrase all the time, oh, they're just kicking the can down the road again. Yeah, they're not wrong when they say that.
Sure.
I think to some measure, when you're talking about deer management, whatever decision you make, 50% of the public is going to hate your guts. Doesn't matter. APRs, the OBR guys are going to hang you. OBR, the APR guys are going to hang you. And either way, the earn a buck guys are pissed off. There's really no winning.
Sure.
And I think that for a long time, we've had commissions that have steered away from the hard decisions. And what's going to get us the least flack? What's not going to rock the boat? Let's just maintain the status quo, because at least there's a level 3 of complaining. But if we start changing stuff, it's going to be a level 9 complaining, and we don't want that. Because ultimately, this goes back to being political appointees, right? Which they serve at the pleasure of the governor. And like it or not, the governor probably, on average, doesn't really have a whole lot of knowledge about steelhead or black bears or wolves or deer or whatever it is, on average. So they appoint these people to handle these issues. So when the commission does something and it pisses people off, and the governor's office is getting emails and phone calls from lobbyists, guess what? Commissioners are getting fired.
Yeah.
It's that simple. But I do think that we have a commission that they've got some cojones, and I'm excited to see what they're going to do, because from all the conversations I've had leading up to this week, there is a hunger and a willingness for change. There's a willingness to make hard decisions, and I haven't seen that before. I'm excited. I'm optimistic, and perhaps my optimism is misplaced and I'm the fool, but I've been around this game a while, and I think we're in the midst of something special here.
Well, I'll tell you, as a guy who's been on the outside looking in, from what I've seen on a lot of talks on social media, from what I'm hearing you saying, I'm cautiously optimistic. I don't want to give anybody false hope that like this is the game changer, this is what we've all been waiting for, but I see things changing in the tone, in the overall aura of what this is, in the right direction. So, time will tell, like you said, but I'm cautiously optimistic, and there's going to be things that I think could come down the pipe that are going to piss me off as a hunter. That are like, oh, I don't want that. But if I stop looking at it through my lens and look at it through the lens of these animals that I am absolutely ate up with, if I look at it from their view and not my view, and I think if we all do that, I think we might realize that, this might be some growing pains for me, or it might cause me a little bit of discomfort, but 3 years from now, I'm going to be thinking that was the right move to make. So, yeah.
Well, and I think that that's important to recognize is there's two schools of thought. I spent some time in my life coaching football at different levels, from youth all the way up to varsity football. And I've been able to work with a handful of different programs. And usually when you're coming into a program, there's some problems, right? There's some shortfalls. There's some things that need change or need to be addressed, whether it's, team culture, or whether it's toxic staff, whatever the case may be. It's not running the way it should, and there's a job because there's problems.
Sure.
9 times out of 10, you're having a conversation about culture surrounding an athletics program. What's the culture? That's the buzzword. Culture, culture, culture. There's 2 schools of thought when it comes to how to change culture in an athletics program. A, you write a 3-year, 5-year, 7-year, and 10-year plan. And you do it very slowly, very incrementally over time. You don't rock the boat too hard. You don't piss people off. There's no real measurable attrition. We're just going to ease everybody into this.
Or you rip the Band-Aid off.
Or you go in there, fire everybody, and start from zero. And people are going to have their hair on fire.
Sure.
But here's the thing. In football, not unlike the hunting world, people can deal with discomfort and things they don't like if it's accompanied by success.
Results driven. Yeah.
Yes. You can come in and you can light a football program on fire. And if you're putting wins on the scoreboard, people are going to go,
yeah,
well,
he's winning.
Knows
so.
what he's doing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that the same is true of hunters to some extent, right? And the department and the commission for a long time have to some measure tried this very subtle little nudge plan that in 10 years maybe we can do this. That's not where I stand, and that's not where a lot of my teammates on the deer advisory team stand. That's not where some of these commissioners stand. We're about ready to light some hair on fire.
Sure.
And we recognize that there's going to be some upset. There's going to be some air quotes mad parents. But we really believe there's going to be results. And like we talked about earlier in the podcast, when you place the resource first, the hunter will benefit every single time. It's not if, it's when.
Exactly. No, I can get behind that 100%. For sure. For sure.
So I think that Michigan hunters, they're in for some discomfort in the short term. Consider this 2-a-days. We're going to grind.
We're going to get after it.
There's going to be some yelling and some screaming.
A little puking.
Might be a little sweat, a little blood, but you know what? Things have been allowed to fall in disrepair for too long. And now we got to get uncomfortable to make it right, to get our program, air quotes, on track and performing the way it should be. It's no different between the locker room and what we're doing here with Deer Regs. It's really the same issues.
Yeah.
And I think that once people see results, deliverables, if you will, then they're going to go, why in the hell didn't we do this 15 years ago, 20 years ago?
Sure.
This is awesome.
Yeah. No,
it might take 3 years, 5 years to reach that point biologically. But what's that in the grand scheme? It's a flash in the pan.
It's nothing. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's you're getting me excited about it. You're putting me in a much better place than I was before we started this episode. If that makes you feel any better, this redneck over here is like, hey man, maybe there is some hope here. So let's jump on to the next topic. But Jordan, before we do, and I'm gonna have to edit this out, but my old man bladder can't go another 5 minutes before I piss myself. So I'm gonna quick put my headset down, go take a piss, and I'll jump right back. All right?
I'm gonna grab some more water.
Fair enough, man. And with that piss break, folks, I think that is going to be the perfect time to shut down part 1 of this 2-part podcast episode, and we will pick it up again next Tuesday, February 17th, for the final part 2 of my conversation with Jordan Hoover. Jordan, again, I really appreciate you taking the time last night / this morning. We went a long time, but it was a great conversation. So thank you very much for joining. Folks, thanks for listening. I know this one and part 2 are both going to be a little long-winded, but I think there's a lot of great information in there. And just a warning for folks, part 2, I started to fade after about the first hour and a half. I was getting quite tired, but Jordan was a trooper, and he was able to keep the conversation going in a great direction. And I think we did still have some good substantive conversations. So I will see you guys again for the introduction of part 2 of this episode series of episode 24. Episode 24, part 1, which you just listened to, and then February 17th, the drop of episode 24, part 2. So, thanks again, guys. I appreciate you joining. I appreciate the love, the support. get outside and enjoy the winter. This year's flying by fast, and we're always complaining about something here in Michigan, weather related, and pretty soon we're going to be complaining that it's too hot. So get out there, enjoy the snow, go do some ice fishing, do some snowshoeing, do some small game hunting, just go have a good time. This is Wild Spirits Outdoors. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to Wild Spirits Outdoors. We appreciate you joining us on this journey. Don't forget to like, follow, and share wherever you get your podcasts. It helps us grow the tribe and keep on chasing the wild. Stay connected with us on Facebook and Instagram at Wild Spirits Outdoors, and also on YouTube at Wild Spirits Pod. You can also head over to www.wildspiritsoutdoors.com for more content. Until next time, chase the wild, feel the spirit.